And welcome to this edition of the Native News Update on this Monday, June 20th. I'm your host for today's program, Paul DeMain. Many of the stories right here can also be found at our website at IndianCountryNews.com, and here are some of the news stories for the day from the Associated Press and other Native news sources. Why Treaties Matter, Self-Government in the Dakota and Ojibwe Nations is a new traveling exhibition that will explore the Native nations in Minnesota and their history of treaty making with the United States. The grand opening will be August 3rd at the White Earth Tribal Headquarters on the White Earth Reservation, where it will be on view through August 31st. Following its close there at the White Earth Tribal Headquarters, the exhibition will begin a statewide tour through 2012 to reservation and other venues under the auspices of the Minnesota Humanities Center and its partner, the Minnesota Indian Affairs Council. On August 2010, a resolution creating a unique partnership of the Minnesota Indian Affairs Council, the Minnesota Humanities Center, and the Smithsonian's National Museum of the American Indian in Washington, D.C. was approved unanimously by the tribes residing in Minnesota and made it possible for the exhibition to be developed as an educational tool for Minnesota audiences. This exhibit reveals how Dakota and Ojibwe treaties with the U.S. government affected the lands and the lifeways of indigenous peoples of the place we now call Minnesota, and explains why these binding agreements between nations still matter today. That's October 3rd through the 31st at White Earth Reservation in Ogima, October 3rd through the 31st in Becker County Historical Society at Detroit Lakes, October 23rd through November 23rd at the Riverland Community College in Austin, and November 3rd through the 30th at Shared Vision and Bemidji Area Race Relations Council in Bemidji, Minnesota. A member of the Mille Lacs Band of Ojibwe who was brutally beaten in 2006, dragged behind a car and left for dead in sub-zero weather after refusing to join the Vice Lords, has been awarded more than $4.2 million in tribal courts, his attorney announced last week. The civil judgment requires that defendant Keith Wayne Reynolds to pay Cody St. John $3 million in punitive damages. The judge said the award would deter others from using intimidation to further gang activity. On February 13, 2006, Reynolds demanded in front of other band members that St. John join the Vice Lords. St. John, who was 22 at the time, refused. On his way home, he was assaulted. Court documents say Reynolds and another man dragged St. John behind a car, carved the initials VL into his face, arm, and back, and left him barely dressed in sub-zero weather. St. John suffered multiple injuries, including frostbite and traumatic head injury, which led to memory loss and other behavioral problems. The Canadian National Film Board celebrates National Aboriginal Day on June 21st with the online launch of the Pete Standing Alone trilogy, a powerful trio of films about the Blood Reserve in southern Alberta and God's Lake Narrows, an interactive depiction of the reality of life on the reserve. These new releases underline the NFB's long-standing collaboration with Aboriginal communities in the telling of important stories. The Pete Standing Alone trilogy documents the successes, challenges, and transformation experienced by the Blood Reserve in Alberta over the past 50 years. All three films revolve around Pete Standing Alone, the latest documentary installment of Roundup, directed by Blood Elder Narcissi Blood and produced by Aboriginal filmmaker Gil Cardinal. It shows Pete coming a full circle in his dedication to preserving the traditional ways of his people. In Circle of the Sun by Colin Lowe in 1960, he's a disinterested youth, while in Standing Alone, that's another Colin Lowe in 1982, he's a community-minded man, and while in Roundup 2010, he's an impassioned elder. The trilogy is accompanied online by an educator's guide, interviews with the filmmakers, and a playlist of related titles. Most Canadians have never set foot on an Aboriginal reserve and God's Lake Narrows created and written by Winnipeg artist Kevin Lee Burton and NFB Prairie Center producer Alicia Smith, is designed to invite you in there. Charges of exploiting an elderly man have been dropped against the chief of Vermont's Mississauga Abenaki state-recognized tribe. 42-year-old April St. Francis Merrill had pled not guilty in March to charges accusing her of exploiting an elderly adult whose financial records she was managing. Prosecutors had accused Merrill of using $30,000 to pay bank and credit card charges with money that belonged to Louis LaFrance. WCAX-TV reported last week that prosecutors dropped their case against Merrill. July 11th runoff has been scheduled in the election for chief or Miko of the Mississippi Band of Choctaw. The runoff will pit the 61-year-old incumbent Beasley Denson against 50-year-old challenger Phyllis J. Anderson. Complete but unofficial returns from the recent primary election showed Denson had 1,598 and Anderson had 872 votes. 7 other candidates were on that particular primary ballot. Anderson is a tribal council member from the Redwater community in Leake County. If elected, she would become the Choctaw's first female chief. Denson was elected in 2007, defeating longtime chief Philip Martin, who passed away in 2010. Minnesota has sent 3 fire crews to New Mexico to help battle wildfires. The crews have 20 members each. Minnesota also is sending 14 crew carrier trucks. Crew members were meeting up with 2 other crews from Michigan's Upper Peninsula at the Duluth Airport last week and flew to New Mexico. The Minnesota wildfire fighters include members of the state's Department of Natural Resources, the U.S. Forest Service, the U.S. Bureau of Indian Affairs, and agencies from Boise Fort, Grand Portage, Fond du Lac, and Leech Lake, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and the Voyageurs National Park. The crews will serve up to 2 weeks in New Mexico. Oklahoma State University ranks atop a national list that measures the number of American Indian students who graduate with a bachelor's degree. Preliminary data from the National Center for the Education Statistics for 2009 and 10 indicates that 355 American Indians received a degree from Oklahoma State during that school year. It's the second straight year that Stillwater University has topped the list. Jason Kirksey, the Associate Vice President for Institutional Diversity, says Oklahoma State now has a tremendous opportunity to help those students transition into successes in graduate school. The data showed Northeastern State University in Tahlequah ranks second in the number of American Indian graduates with 335, followed by the University of Oklahoma at Norman with 241. Oklahoma has 39 federally recognized tribes in that state. And that is the latest roundup of news from Indian Country on this edition of the Native News Update. We want to say miigwech for joining with us. Come back again soon.